All right. That was a whole fiasco. So what happened, I think I had the stream open in a Discord window. So I have a Discord group, and in that Discord group, the video started auto-playing, and I didn't even think that that could be a thing. But that happens. I'm just gonna have to roll with this. I think it's better that I started a new live stream, because now I can just delete the old one, and everybody don't have to listen to me echoing for 3 minutes non-stop. That's embarrassing, but I'm not gonna do any channel management right now. I'm just gonna get to painting. How is everybody doing? Thank you for the one person who has made it to this new live stream, and I'm sorry that like probably all the links are now broken because I started a new live stream. Anyway, let's make a painting. For anybody who wants to steal a palette, you can do so right now by screenshotting this. This is one of the palettes that come with my art course that is now on Gumroad. And I just think palettes are a really fancy, not fancy, but like convenient starting point for any painting, because you can just focus on blocking in different shapes and then maybe worry about the colors later. But if you have a palette that you already like, or that is close to a mood that fits your kind of like core idea of what you want to do, then starting with a palette, it can kind of like take away a lot of like that beginning sketching friction. Like you see here, I'm just blocking in different shapes. I'm trying to find an interesting shape to work on and to kind of take to the next level with details and line art and all of that stuff. But before I get there, I just want to block in different colors, and the colors are also part of the silhouette, like how the colors are divided on different areas. Hey Anders and Four-Eyed Cat and Pia Pod Dino and others. Thanks for making it to this stream, and my apologies for the rough beginning, but we're here, we're making progress. It's happening right now. Just as I was thinking that like I have figured out all the audio issues, but yeah. I guess when you start doing live streams, you just have to live with it. Can you make a Procreate palette for skin colors? Yeah. Of course, skin colors are so dependent on the environment that would be very focused onto just like one thing, like what kind of environment that person is in, what kind of clothes they're wearing. All of those things affect the skin color. And the environment, what kind of wall they are standing in front of or what's behind them. Those affect skin colors a lot. So I'm just gonna use different hues to try to find something that talks to me as a silhouette. What I really want to have is just like a few simple rows of windows for some sort of like main hall area, and then maybe an echo of that on the other side as a smaller section of this building. Hey Pencil Woods, Hannah and Ritesh Varma. Thank you, Ritesh. That's so nice of you to say. Also, I don't know if this is just me, but like whenever somebody says like something nice about my art during a live stream, when I'm just starting to sketch an idea, I kind of get this nervous energy. Is that like there's a person who likes my art? I really hope that this doesn't disappoint them too badly, because I have no idea what I'm making. So there's always that. But I guess when you're making art, you have to be okay with disappointing people, because that's gonna happen at some point anyway. I think it's something that I try to remind myself, that not only can you not please everybody all the time, but you can't please everybody full stop. And as simple as that sounds, it's really difficult for an artist to kind of like internalize as truth that this, even though it causes friction, it's an irrelevant kind of like thought process, because you will never get there. You will never be the kind of person that makes art that everybody likes, because that's silly. Like, however, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like I really want to be liked, and I feel like the community that I find online through people who see my art, I consider a lot of them my friends. So it's kind of like your friends not liking your work. So I don't know, there's that part. I think first and foremost, it has to be something that feels true when I'm painting it. And that's kind of harder to quantify, that what feels true. But like when you're making something that, when it feels like you're just trying to impress somebody else, then I get a really, really strong like negative reaction that I need to immediately change the entire concept, because it doesn't feel true anymore, and I don't want my art to feel fake. Sorry for beating you in ESC. What is that? What is ESC? Anders, I don't understand. Which pen do you use? I use the standard default Apple Pencil. I like it. I mean, like, it's the reason pretty much why I bought an iPad in the first place, because when I went to an Apple store for the first time trying an iPad, I was kind of non-Apple person and convinced that this is something that I don't need. So there was Procreate on one of the tables, and I remember distinctly like this HB pencil brush, and I drew one line, and I was like, okay, I need to stop everything that I'm doing. I'm not going to be using Photoshop anymore. I'm not going to be using Cintiq anymore. I'm going to buy an iPad, and that's how I'm going to make all of my art, because the difference in response time was so huge compared to insanely expensive Cintiq that it just does not compare in any way. I think even still Wacom is just like light years behind in the response time when it comes to the input latency, basically. I think I'm kind of liking this. I'm wondering if it's too small or not. And the brush that I'm now using, this is the brush set that I'm going to be releasing next week for all of the channel members. And this is the beginning of this new brush set that I'm working on, but I want to start it slow, because I want to make sure that each brush works so that I don't waste anyone's time by just like pushing all kinds of brushes to people that need further testing. I want to do as few of them as humanly possible, and everyone has to have like a very distinct function. This brush that I'm using currently, which is called Opaque Wet on Wet. So this is a brush when you use different colors on the same layer. I can do this sort of color blending, especially when I'm pressing lightly and sideways on the screen. So this is good for like this sort of like finding different shapes. I love this sort of like messing around phase in paintings. So having a brush for this, I think it's really cool. Also, since I like painting kind of like worn surfaces a lot, like for example, weathered stone surfaces or wooden buildings that have paint that has peeled off, using this sort of brush like allows me to build those layers that are not perfect, that you can see the previous different color layers peeking through. Oh my god, I still have that sort of like build up stress from like starting the disastrous sound looping thing. I'm so sorry, but at the same time it's kind of have to push through it. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like, I think that was probably the worst that this whole live stream is ever gonna get, so it's only uphill from here, said a runner. Oh, sorry for beating you. I think, Anders, that's fine. I think Lorraine deserved the win. I think it was a good track. Definitely liked it. But the popular vote was for Finland, quite clearly. But still, I have dog hair in my mouth. I like that there are these like professional judges, because it prevents kind of like other neighboring countries just voting for each other, which I think like especially like around Mediterranean is an issue. I think the judges kind of like even that out a little bit. So I think overall it's a good thing. I think both were really good performances. I liked Finland's performance. It was nice to have an Eurovision song that was in Finnish. I don't remember when was the last time, like maybe Taikapeili ages ago. I don't remember the last time that we had a Finnish track. So that was nice. And also, like, Finland coming second, like, that's still, like, really historically good results. And I don't like heavy music, but I think there's, like, something about a song coming from Finland that is kind of, like, representing, like, Finnish music tastes. So that's something that I liked, that the Finnish song sounded like it's Finnish, because it had that sort of like heavy twist to it. I have to say that the most Finnish song in the Eurovision contest this year was definitely from Norway. So thank you for sending that Nightwish song. I like that a lot. Not a fan of the costume design, but the song itself was great. Like really classic Nightwish. Sid Bakir is saying your brush looks like Blueberry brush. Yes, Blueberry brush also has like this sort of like mixing capabilities. This has a little bit more texture. That's because I've been recently like really into creating brushes from poster paints. So I've had my poster paints out, and I've even like ordered all kinds of like new art materials. to make this process. So what I wanted, especially in my last painting, I'm not sure what the name of that painting is going to be, like maybe Island of Time. But in that piece, I realized that I really want to create brushes that have that sort of mix between hard textures that I can paint sharp details, but I also wanted to have a little bit of like that optical blending of dry brushes. So when I'm like lifting up a brush lightly, I'm gonna show it with this tilt for dry brush, which is doing exactly what it says in the label. So if I'm holding it directly towards the canvas, like this looks like a normal brush, but if I'm tilting the brush, I get these like very dry, sparse hair textures. And this is something that I wanted to use in areas where I'm painting, for example, elements that are not the main focal point, but I just wanted to have this sort of like soft optical blending without using like Gaussian blur, without using like soft edges, but using optical blending. And optical blending means like when you see both colors at high opacity close to each other, and then you have this simultaneous contrast effect, especially when the values are close to each other, that the eye starts kind of like bouncing between those colors. And in those sort of elements, I think it's a fun effect to play around with. I think this could be a fun idea. And then just continue that beam in perspective. I think the middle part for me is just going to be the hardest thing to balance in this composition, because it's honestly something that I don't do that often. So maybe I should just like add a 1-point perspective from drawing guide, perspective, and then just tap. When you do a one-point perspective, you really want to pay attention to where you're putting your horizon line, and horizon line is this blue line that is usually on your eye level if you are painting a painting where you're standing on the ground in a scene like this specifically. I think I'm gonna put it like quite low, because I don't want the ground to be too important. I love painting skies. Maybe I can use my sky brush set for that part. And just put it somewhere around here. So that's going to make the perspective really strong in the lower half of the painting. It's gonna make them a little bit thicker. And since I have blue colors here in the background, I'm gonna change the color so that I can actually see the grid. And I'm still not using drawing assist, because you really don't want to be too kind of like tied down into this perspective guides or any sort of like assisting features before you have your design aspect of your illustration done. Because if you have, for example, your perspective guides on and you do your design thinking that every line is going to be in perfect perspective, in the end you're just going to have like a stack of boxes and it's not going to look interesting. So all of those perspective issues, like they're like super easy when it comes to art to fix, and I'm going to show that later. In this piece, that's going to be like the easiest part of this entire whole thing. And the most difficult part is going to be the design to make it interesting. I think the fun part about a one-point perspective is that you can really focus on making your silhouette read as well as it should. And that's one skill that you can take to all kinds of different, whatever type of art you are making. The same rules apply. Just because a painting has 3-point perspective, like for example, in some of my recent pieces I've had 3-point perspectives, it doesn't make the piece better. I think this is actually fun because like then if I have some sort of beams around these areas right here, I mean lower than those lines that I showed, then I can kind of like play around with the light, the way that it's kind of wrapping around those columns and have some sort of chords also coming out from here. Because if I think about it, like the chords should be like somewhere along these lines. Are we on the tracks? That's something I should think about. I don't want these elements to kind of like obscure the building too much. At the same time, I kind of need to have them. Then placing the sun right here and using bloom effects to in either way some of that high contrast, that could be a way to make it seem less crazy later. Do you plan on buying iPad new M2? I think the M2 has been kind of a flop because it doesn't really boost the performance that much. So the current iPad model doesn't really interest me. However, if they add even like a single inch of screen in the next one, then I will definitely buy it. I'm probably going to buy it anyway if the performance gets better. But M2 didn't bring like any significant improvements to performance. And when you're getting an iPad, I think one of the kind of least talked about features between those different models is that when you're buying an iPad, you should check how much RAM memory the version you're getting has in that version. Because when they release, for example, iPad Pro, iPad Pro, M1 or M2, those are not all the same machines. Like all M1 iPads or M2 iPads, they're not the same. It depends on how much storage that device has. That determines how much RAM that device has. And there's usually a cutoff point around 1 terabyte. So for example, on this model, iPads that have less than 1 terabyte of storage, they have half the RAM. And the same goes for M2. So if somebody has, for example, a year newer iPad than this one, but it has less than 1 terabyte of storage, then it has less RAM than this older M1 iPad. So that's something that you really want to check when you're deciding what model to buy. And that can determine like how many layers your device has. When I made the art course, like this is something that I had to think about when I made the example file, because I uploaded it in 3 different sizes. Sorry, didn't mean to hit that. Just so that the Procreate file opens on all different kinds of devices. And there were some like people with M2 iPads that had to open it on open the smaller version, because the bigger version did not open their device because their device did not have enough RAM. But I uploaded 3 different versions, so even like a super old toaster version of an iPad should be able to open the smallest one. This looks like a gateway to a bear kingdom, Monica is saying. Yeah, that sounds fun. Saurav Subba is saying, can you tell us how you use layers for different shades, especially when the art is so complex and requires so many blends? I try to paint elements on different layers based on how close they are to the camera. I think that is the easiest way to keep the layers organized. And whenever I don't need a layer anymore, then I will just flatten them to free up more space. And I treat my layers as very like temporary things. They can be something that I just try one thing, and if it doesn't work, I'll do something else. And this is also something that I do very often, that like when I want to try new things, I will just make a duplicate version of that layer that I'm gonna try crazy things on. So if I want to kind of go back, I can easily just get rid of this layer and use the original one. But there's something about this color, this sort of like desaturated greenish blue, that somehow speaks to me. I don't know a better way to say that. So I'm gonna try to see where this leads. So if I have, for example, decorative elements, maybe they could have like a contrasting color that is more saturated, and that could be that sort of accent color that makes those areas pop a little bit more. This is the brush that I'm most happy with, but I will probably change the name, this flat dual V. But this is the brush that I have the most use out of, because I can do like very thin, crisp lines like these, and then sideways I get this very fine, opaque posterior color texture. And that is really the whole essence of like what's the point of like this process that I'm making, that I want to get that sort of like Ghibli anime background, traditional vintage look in digital format, where I can kind of like push the colors to be like more saturated and I don't need to kind of like mimic the traditional tools. There's just like some qualities of those tools that I like. But if I wanted to like make these paintings have that exact same look, then I would just switch to traditional media and try to learn that. For that reason, I'm like not too excited about some art applications like, what is the Photoshop version of Procreate again? Fresco. So Fresco has very like natural looking watercolor effects, and they are so realistic that when I'm using them, like it comes with like all of the complications of using watercolor, that I feel like if I really want to do this, I would just pick watercolors from my closet and use them to have the full benefit of those tools. I don't know. Maybe somebody likes that sort of like full simulation, but I'm kind of like more aware of like the benefits of digital medium. And for me, for example, speed is a really big thing. I need the speed to be quick. I don't have time for things to dry. Maybe that's just a concept artist thing, that like some people like art as objects. For me, it's about ideas, really. So if there's like any way to make the same idea faster, then I will just do that. It's that simple for me. When I'm teaching concept art, this kind of like blows the mind of a lot of students, because they feel like there's some sort of an art police that is watching their every move, and they have to make a painting a certain way for them to have like enough credibility points. But it's really the idea that gets judged. Of course, the presentation, because like I'm teaching them to also sell the idea. So the way that you do that in illustration format is to make it have an emotional hook to whoever is seeing it. Gibbon is saying, do a stock brush Procreate. Do a stock brush Procreate brush challenge, please. Gibbon, you have to be more give me more details, because I don't know what that is. Can you draw faster? No. This is it. I have the new M2 iPad Pro, but the battery is not the best. I have my iPad almost always attached to power when I'm working here, so I really haven't felt any of the changes in the last iPad batteries the way that they probably like exist. But previously, when I was like taking my iPad everywhere and I was painting on the move, then it was kind of like easier to notice when the battery efficiency got better or worse. But right now I just paint always here because I'm making videos for you guys. So even this thing is being recorded top down. That's why I can't have the iPad in an ergonomic position, because it's for filming in this direction. Okay, is there something on this layer? No. I will need to make this front look more interesting than just a box. But I think box is a good starting point right now. Okay. I'm gonna lower the opacity of the drawing guide. Because these diagonal lines already show me the location of the vanishing point quite well, and I don't want the drawing guides to affect the way that I read the colors and values, because like having it on, especially in like these portions where it gets more dense, it affects the way that I see colors. So for that reason, I'm just gonna lower that a little bit. So this is one of those situations where I'm just not erasing the colors that I don't like, but I am painting over them. And that way I can kind of build up those like different layers of colors. And you can see that if you look at it really closely, you can see that the colors kind of optically blend here in all these different surfaces. This doesn't matter as much as what it looks like from here, but just like building up that like texture, I just personally like those sort of surfaces in my paintings. I think they're more fun to watch and they give the eye a little bit more stuff to process rather than just having like filled in flat colors. And you can do this with like any textured brush really, but that's the main reason why I wanted to start working on this poster color brush set, is to have that sort of painterly look. I love you too, lab in Toronto. What do you think about Midjourney? Well, currently Midjourney is in a situation where if you make anything with that tool, it's not yours. You didn't make it. It doesn't belong to you, and you can't get copyright to it. Like according to the recent statements from the Copyright Office, like copyrights aren't awarded to works created with those sort of tools. So that's it. I think a lot of people assume that when I say something about this topic, that I feel somehow like extremely strongly about it. But I've noticed that there's just no way to say online that you don't care that much about something when people just kind of like assume that you do anyway. But I'm gonna try anyway. Since you're here listening, I'm just gonna say that the whole thing, what I think about that right now. A lot of people seem to think that devices such as Midjourney will somehow completely revolutionize concept art and change the way that we make concept art to any sort of projects. And I don't think that anybody who is saying that understands what concept art actually is. So I think it's probably going to have that effect on illustration. Definitely. And a lot of like other fields where visual, just like illustrations are important. But when a company orders a concept art piece, when I'm working on a concept art for some project, I'm just gonna like visualize it because like this is the best way that I can explain it. I'm gonna show this with the overhead camera. What about now? Can you hear me now? I'm just gonna check what it says here. It says that this should be on. Oh dear Lord. Can you hear me now? Okay. So, did you hear none of the explanation about the timeline? Just to... Okay. When you make the screen smaller, we can hear you. Okay, so I'm gonna do that again. So the pink portion of this thing, or the blue portion of this timeline, that's when I'm actually making the illustration that I'm handing off to a client that has ordered a concept art piece. This entire bar here, like this, is the entire timeline that it takes to create a concept art piece. Here is where the client gets that concept art piece. This is the creation of the artwork. This is the actual work and time that goes into creating that concept art piece. This is just the making of the illustration. So when people say to me that like this portion is going to completely change, which I don't believe is going to happen, or alter in like significant ways, it's still not going to change the entire concept art process, which is like the most of this. So for that reason, I don't feel that strongly about it. So if people, for example, ask me to make a picture where they have a shopping list of items that they want there. They want 5 characters who are wearing blue clothes that have a historical French look to them, with these sort of details as referenced by this Pinterest gallery, and they are riding horses that have 6 legs. Here are the reference pictures for what the horses are supposed to look like. We are not making concept art anymore. We are making an illustration, and that's a job that is better done by somebody else that is not me. Does that make sense? So in that sense, I don't think it's going to affect me that much. But I think it's great that people are fighting for their copyrights and that their work is not going to be used for profit by other companies. I think artists need to get paid because they made those tools possible. So, of course, I'm on their side in this. But these AI tools have been here already for a really long time, not just in like this dramatic sense, but in some other format. Like, for example, a lot of my paintings have had thumbnails on this YouTube channel where the painting just ends and I need to have a 16:9 thumbnail for it. A lot of like that extra stuff has been generated by healing brush tools or stamp tools, which are also AI assisted tools. And it's just like one more way to make that art faster. I guess the more interesting conversation would be that, like, how do you guys feel about like these AI art tools? Does it make sense what I said to you about like the concept art process? Do you understand the difference? I think the colors are kind of like slightly all over the place, but there's something like harmonious about them at the same time. So whenever colors like don't quite work, I usually start with working on the most kind of like offensive colors. Like right now, these greens are the most saturated colors and they are the least fitting with everything else. So it's just kind of like bringing down the hue variety as much as possible while trying to keep the composition interesting, I think that's the easiest way to kind of bring everything together. I wonder why the overhead camera. It's because every single view has its own sound settings, so I'm just gonna not press any buttons. I think recently my past few live streams on the membership side of this channel have been kind of disasters, to be completely honest. It's because I'm getting used to using this new microphone, and it's gonna suck in the beginning before I know how to use the settings for this microphone, but in the long term it's going to make the content for everybody on this channel better. I can't really discuss the details of the projects that I have been working on, but as I'm working on a lot of environments now, I used to love making characters, but it's just something that I noticed that the client process is too stressful for my mental health, for like all the politics that go along with it. That's not, I think that's a valuable battle for people to have, but like I don't have the strength for it. Sad to say. So because I'm making a lot of environment art, like honestly, the environment has the same reasons why characters need these sort of details. But when you're doing an environment, you're thinking about the placement of doors, you're thinking about the history, what kind of materials they used at a time like this, and how that can be shown in your environment, what kind of interesting camera angles can the environment provide for the director to show different scenes, like what's the emotional like tone that scene that you're depicting has. If you're doing, for example, movie concept art, then you have to think about not just the materials, but how are the materials gonna look on camera, which has its own set of different rules, like how do they move, like what kind of character, like what kind of associations you are trying to connect with in the audience to understand this story, not just like the plot of the story, but like what's the emotional lesson that people are gonna get from all of this. And as you are building your environment, you keep thinking about these elements. And often in concept art, if you are, for example, if you are working on a movie, there might be a script that you need to read in a really, really quick fashion, because you need to probably read it several different times. And if you're doing a concept art piece for a specific scene in that script, you need to keep making notes, for example, how fast do these vehicles move. It might not be said in the original text that the story is based on, but then you will just look for clues. Then for this reason, I recommend getting an audiobook and a Kindle version of that script if it's publicly available like that. But if it's just a PDF that they send to you, that a screenwriter has sent you, then you really have to do manually all of this work, and I have done it. It's not fun. So you will look for clues, for example, when people are using that vehicle or they are using that road, and try to look for clues in the text that say that what time of day was it when they left, what time is it when they arrive. That tells you how fast or what distance that road or other like characteristics of that vehicle, what kind of terrain does a vehicle need to travel based on what kind of environments or what kind of nature that area has. In a recent concept sketch that I did for like one production company, I'm gonna try to like stay as vague as possible. There was this clock tower or bell tower in the town, and the town had a certain number of exits, and in many scenes the bells of the bell tower are heard by the main characters as they are going through their adventures in these books. So I had notes for all of those moments, and from the way that the sound was depicted from different areas of the town on different gates, I was able to locate where those gates are placed and able to like kind of like design the entire town layout based on that, so that it followed its own internal logic. Are you starting to get a sense of like how a concept art piece is like very little about like that, making the actual image? And for example, if I'm working on a video game, I'm looking at like reference games. Of course, I'm already a gamer. I know a lot of different genres and how different kind of like scenes are designed in games. But usually I have a lot of conversations with the development team, and I'm asking them like very direct questions, like how do you feel like, for example, that this game compares to what you are making? Does it have this feature? Because that tells me which kind of colors I need to preserve for the interactive elements, because usually in game environment design, you really need to have like your set palette or contrast range for elements that are the most usable and necessary for players to identify right away, and come up with like conventions on how players can read the situations more quickly. Like that sort of stuff. It takes a lot of time. And also, like when you're making a game, you also have to understand what kind of games the developers like. Because there's a very specific different tone then that they are kind of like going to lean towards. And I think especially when you're working with games, it's really important to consistently be able to sell your ideas, and that's its own like very specific skill that you need to prepare for, and you need to make a specific pitch for. So that you can all be like on the same page. And that's not easy. It's really difficult. So Jacob said, AI art is generated by processing multiple real artworks, so I don't feel it has originality. I agree with that. Kenshin is saying, feel one key feature that Procreate lacks is color pick ignoring layer blend mode. Yes, yes, I fully agree. Oh my god. Every time I want to pick a color of, say, screen layer, I have to turn to normal mode and turn back after. Yes, I hate that. Catherine Simoni is saying, I was scared about AI. Small company can... Oh. I guess like if you're working in a small company as an illustrator, yes, I can see how a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I really, really think that no matter who you are and no matter for what company you are working for, if you're a concept artist or illustrator, start digging your exit route. I mean, like, not just because of AI art, but like anyway. You never want to be fully reliant on just your place of employment. Maybe you don't currently have like social media following that will sustain a freelance business, but you can start to build one, and I think you should. I think you should. Maybe that's not your business. Maybe you can do like other sort of like consulting work and start building a business for that. But I do think that no matter where you are working, you should start anyway. Even if you never need to use that like exit route, just having it is gonna bring you so much like peace of mind that I think it's worth it. I think it's always worth it. So I really want to draw this at an angle, but because it's a one-point perspective, this is going to be a completely directly horizontal line. I'm just gonna have to deal with it. Chlorine at IDS is saying AI art is very easy to spot. It looks too clean. It's not my cup of tea. Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think that there's this like sense of betrayal that some people feel when they are looking at something that like might initially look impressive and they feel like, oh, this really talks to me. But then when they realize that it's just AI art, it feels like a lie that you thought that like a human being was saying something important to you. And then when it's not, then it feels a bit like it cheapens it somehow. Because there is not that sort of like deeper level to be found in why they chose to like use these specific plants or colors in this area. What were they trying to say you that you can understand life better and make it more tolerable or easier to understand all the complexities of life. I think that's the purpose of art. And if you take that away from it, you don't have art. You might have incredibly impressive, beautiful pictures, but you don't have art. And I think that's the difference. I think this wall could have very bright kind of reflections on there, maybe even windows. I don't know. If the sunlight is coming from somewhere around there, then this could be a reflection point for windows that could give me an opportunity to play with all of those chords that are going to be happening in this section right here. Like all of these are just going to be a jumbled mess of like very high contrast detail that is going to be incredibly difficult for the composition to deal with. Maybe they don't have to be in the middle actually. Did this work? No. It's gonna do one here. That's it. And we are standing between those beams. Okay. So basically I'm like planning the high contrast mess that is going to be like here in the middle, and trying to find a solution that can kind of like wash away that contrast so that it doesn't become the main point of this whole piece. So I'm gonna just like slap on a lighten layer here, and that's going to wash away a lot of that contrast. Like somewhere around this region. So I'm gonna have a lot of like thin wires that are gonna look dark in silhouette, but if I do them like that, that's not going to bring down the entire illustration. Digitalin Daniel is saying Ongo Gablogian would be factually correct in calling AI art derivative, because all AI art has to be. Abe, hello, sorry for coming in late. Like, that's fine. You missed a lot of like the audio technical difficulties because you are late. Abe is saying, I would love to start of this stream. Love the painting already. Oh, thank you. Thanks for having so much faith in my art. Sometimes I feel like I don't have enough faith in my own art. Saurav Subba is saying, has there been a situation where you work on an art piece for hours and then you feel it's not leading anywhere, so you scrap the whole piece? Yes, when I was not a professional artist and when I was not studying art in an art school, then I would do that all the time. But if you are an art student, you need to stop like scrapping your ideas, because you need to be able to make it work. And I'm saying this with confidence here because I am assuming that a lot of you are making digital art. If you have, for example, a watercolor piece or a Sumi-E ink piece that you have ruined by clogging it in some area, that's different. But if you're doing a digital piece, I think it's your job to rescue it. I think it's pretty much unacceptable to just leave it and run away from the crime scene of your art, because you did not learn anything from that. Because you can fix anything, like any painting, no matter how hopeless it might look. If it's not reading, then you are at that point where you can ask yourself, why is it not reading? Like, why is it not connecting with you on an emotional level? If you can answer that question, then you can fix it. But if you can't answer that question, that just means that like in this thing that you have in front of you, this visual problem solving thing, you have the tools to become a better artist. End of story. But those sort of visual problems will come at the next painting. It's not gonna be easier. And when you are committed to publishing your artwork, then you go through this process of like stumbling upon unique, interesting visual problem solving situations, and you keep fixing them over and over. The more times that you go through this process of like getting stuck on a visual problem solving issue and then solving it, the faster you become a better artist. But every time you run away, then you have just like wasted all of that time that you spent on the painting in the first place. And starting a new painting is not gonna make you a better artist faster. So no, I don't leave my paintings unfinished when something like that happens. The previous painting that I just made, The Island of Time, I think it had a lot of like readability issues because there were so many contrasting elements overlapping each other. So for hours and hours, for a few entire days, I was painting away details from my own painting. I was looking at it and seeing the edges that needed to be brought forward and what edges needed to be pushed back. And I would paint away details from those areas that were creating all of this visual noise that was not helping me. So a lot of my time went into making areas less interesting. That is just as important as making your focal points interesting, to understand where the painting needs to be boring and how you can get there. Like for example, in most cases, like the corners of your painting need to be quite boring. That's a design challenge in itself already, because it's so easy to drive a lot of attention to the corners of your painting, especially when you're working on a one-point perspective illustration such as this one. Because you can have easily lines that like lead into the corners of your painting, to the middle of your painting, cut it in half like this. All of those elements are very easy mistakes to do if you're working on a one-point perspective. But all of those are very easily fixable, like problems to solve. Anders is saying, can AI say something innovative and important to us? Maybe it can recycle some of those ideas or present them in a way that kind of make us pay attention to those, but it will not be like coming up with those concepts on its own. But isn't that kind of like the whole magic of writing, that you come up with a way to say something in a unique way that people will pay attention to the message? So I guess it can say. It can make us pay attention to important messages. I think that at least seems like it should be true. I'm using the brush sideways to do like a very low opacity textured blur, if that makes sense, because I'm doing it on a layer mask. Abe is asking, would you say real life reference is better than pictures? Definitely, definitely, always. Since it's summer, and I hope it's warm enough where you are, like, do take advantage of being able to have access to a lot more real life references around you during summer. You can go, for example, and draw trees. You can learn everything there is to know about composition through drawing trees. No, this is not a joke. I really do mean that. Makes no sense to take a picture of a tree and then draw it. I think when you do those two things, then you immediately notice the limitations of like what photographs have. But when you don't have any other, like literally when there's no other way to access that sort of reference, then in those cases, like, of course, a picture is still better than no reference at all. Like, for example, for this, I have tons of like research that I have done of these old Finnish train stations. There's no train station that looks like this, but like the shape language, the materials, what kind of details there are on train platforms. Like that's all work that I have already done before this live stream even started. I have schematics, for example, of like how to build old wooden buildings from this era. It's not what I'm doing. It's not gonna look like that, but that's the information that I'm going to use as like building material for this piece. And I am going to interpret that in a way that fits the story of this piece that I'm telling here. So this is gonna be the platform. And I think I wanna end it around here so that I can have some sort of like visual interest in this region. And maybe continue it all the way here. Maybe the platform could be made out of like a concrete slab. It could have a bit more modern materials in it, just because these train tracks are still in the same location. But now maybe in the day and age that is being depicted in this illustration, there is a little bit more longer trains, so that the platform has to continue further because there's also more passengers for them. Yeah, that makes sense. So these are the kind of things that you necessarily don't plan in advance. It's just like when you're doing a piece, they kind of like slowly become apparent. I don't know if I have time in this live stream to do like very fine ornate details, but I could do some so that you understand how I'm kind of like fixing the perspective as I'm working. And why I said that thing about like not having the grid on too early to keep the focus on your design, because that's going to make or break your illustration, really. I need to have also a platform on this side. And maybe it needs to end around the same area, just because it makes sense that these modern elements are built in a symmetrical way. If it was older, then maybe it wouldn't need that sort of level of symmetry, and that could be one way to kind of tell a story through these sort of like very small details. Okay, let's design a window. K-Dot is saying, good question, what canvas size do you work on? Currently it's 5000 by 4000, but I think I could bump this up to 5000. And that would still give me like 56 layers, so I think that's enough. I think at this point, before I get into the details, I think it's a really good moment to see if you are happy with your resolution, because even now all of the details are probably going to be like repainted over. Do you like sad, moody paintings sometimes? I think like I mostly like sad, moody paintings. I think what I like most of all is when a painting has this sort of like overcast, low contrast mood. That's what I really like, but I think it's one of those elements where when you're working with social media, you have to kind of like come to terms with some facts that you need certain level of like high contrast for other people to be interested in your illustrations when they just see them as like small thumbnails or scroll past them in a feed in social media. It's very hard to grab attention with something that is like muted and low contrast, and I think that's a shame, but it's like that's what it is. And of course you always have the option of like ignoring social media and like focusing on fine art and gallery exhibitions where people have no choice but to spend time with your painting. And I think that's a respectable choice too. I just think gallery exhibitions are so expensive that it's not really a viable route for me. And also I kind of always wanted to make art for just normal people who would not go to an art gallery and give them sort of like similar experiences and kind of like thought-provoking moments through my paintings. But they would not go to an art gallery. They would not look at a banana taped to a wall. They would just get angry and not think about it more. I do think that there's value in taping bananas to walls, but I'm trying to like bring those sort of like some of those ideas into kind of more approachable form. one thing that really it triggers me in a way is like when somebody says online that this is real art. That sentence means absolutely nothing to me. Because real art doesn't mean that it's like skillfully made or took a lot of time to make. I think it's more decided on like the impact that it has on society. And you don't have to like it for it to have that effect. And I think that's something that a lot of people have difficulty coming to terms with, that art can create uncomfortable feelings and it has value. They kind of like don't like that idea. K-Dot is asking, how are you streaming? I'm streaming through OBS. That's okay, Abe. I just don't understand the question about traditional art. If you can be more specific, then I can answer that more clearly. Cloring at Ideas is saying, one thing I've learned is you have to trust the process and build little by little. It's easy to get carried away and go to the details immediately. Watching your process is inspiring. Thank you. Yeah, I think details are always easy. They're always easy. Doing details is the easiest part of the entire painting because all it requires is time. And there's a huge risk of like kind of like losing your way. Like when you're working on details like zoomed in this close, like I am right now, I have no idea what these brushstrokes are gonna do to my composition. I could spend a lot of time here, and since it's such like a controlled small space, it's relatively easy to make this small space look nice. It's very emotionally also comfortable working here because I don't have to deal with like all of the craziness of this. But if I work only on here and then zoom out, I might have spent all of that time destroying my painting, and I just wouldn't know it if I work on details too early like that. That's why I don't think about painting as this sort of like collection of areas that need to be finished. It's just like going over these different passes of finish over and over, getting closer to the version that is going to be the final one. But a lot of my brushstrokes I see as kind of temporary or best guesses for what I'm doing. Like at this moment, this brushstroke is my best guess of like what something is gonna look like. Okay, now I'm looking at my building references. I'm thinking about creating a window. And I think I'm gonna use symmetry to do this. Like for example, right now, the reference of a window that I have on my phone screen right now, those are for vertical windows, where it's very tall and slim. And I'm doing like a very small, tiny window for this walkway above there. I think it might have kind of like a low ceiling as well, and still I need to kind of like fit in same sort of like architectural details for this window. So I can't just like repeat the reference that I'm seeing. I'm trying to do it in a way that fits this specific design. And I'm gonna try doing the most simple basic version first, because then I might be able to use that as a shape language for the rest of the windows. I think there are like very fine details here, but because of the distance from camera, I also have to think about like what kind of details would the eye focus on, not just what kind of details there are. So I kind of like invented a new pattern for this specific train station. Actually, I think it's kind of interesting that like it meets at the center point of this piece. Almost like a hidden focal point with less contrast. I think that could be interesting. I'm gonna turn on the snapping for this, just so that I have them horizontally on the same level. So if anybody has been watching my composition videos on membership, like that's the one of those composition checklist items that is working here. And now to make these layers kind of like more economic, I'm just gonna take all of the frames for these windows and I'm gonna merge them together. Because they are not touching each other, it's fine for them to be on the same layer. Same for the windows themselves. Because I can use these as locked pixels for painting stuff inside the train station. And for that, I only need this information. And also because they are not connected, then that means that I can have them on the same layer. Always when you're struggling with what layers to delete, think about what elements are not touching, because like those elements are easy to edit in isolation, even if they are on the same layer, as long as they're not touching each other. So if I added this sort of like hang to the wires, then I think I can kind of better have them be less important. Okay, but to edit these, I need to know where the perspective lines are. So I'm gonna go back into Edit Drawing Guide, and if you switch between these different modes, it will remember the last setting that you had. So here, the vanishing point lines are still in the exact same space as before when I went into working on those new elements. So here, I'm just gonna draw a quick guide for different beams. That are happening there. Would this be too distracting? I wonder. It is kind of huge. So here would be this first beam. The first one is really gonna decide where all the rest of these are gonna go. So this I will just use as a guide to get the second one in place later. I mean, something like that could work. It's a lot of chords, but still, like, maybe not too crazy, I hope. And then that would mean that the beam is somewhere around here. I think if I put the bottom so close to the ground, bottom half of this illustration, then that will kind of like justify there not being another one in front, and still allows me to keep that kind of small. These are really just like design elements before getting into like any of the crazy details that literally just take time. That's all. There's like nothing fancy about details. It's all about just like putting down ideas at this point, and those ideas can be processed further later. Don't forget platform name. Yeah, I think that's really important. Maybe I could have like a blue sign, like the signs are here in Finland for all the different train platforms. By the way, I'm sorry for the chair creaking so much. I know that I should buy a new chair, especially for these live streams and for recording, but yeah, that's kind of like daunting task, to be honest. Most of the things that I have bought for this channel, like they are kind of easy to order online. But I think a chair, I really need to know how much sounds it makes. I can't have it creaking all the time like this, because that's really a huge waste of my time when I'm editing, and if I have like creaking chair sounds, that takes a lot of like editing time to fix, or sometimes I just need to do a new recording. Anders is saying, are you also using vector painting programs? There are no vector painting programs. There are illustration programs that use vectors. And vectors are handy for when you are, for example, designing logos, which I really don't do that much these days. I have Illustrator, but you can't, or you shouldn't, or nor do I recommend doing paintings with vectors, because you are really losing a lot of like horsepower of your hardware for completely irrelevant things in your painting process, because you don't need to have that scalability. And when you keep that scalability in, then you are sacrificing so many other things that you could be using for painting. So one thing that just came to my mind as I was saying that is maybe there could be like one archway here. So like a hard part of this building that cuts the entire platform. But at the same time, it has this sort of like a small hole in it for people to walk through. I think that could be cool. Like these sort of like small elements always give me like that sort of like sense of adventure that I'm trying to create with my illustrations, and especially with environment designs, it's all about just like very childlike impulses of like how a kid might navigate the environment and what they might find adventurous in it. So that's why I love bridges. I think bridges are like adventures for real people. Are wires on correct height? Probably not. That's just stuff that I will need to tweak later. Yeah, I think the wires will continue all the way down here actually when I'm done with that part, like on this level. So they will become even more vertically towards this part. But maybe because of that, I can use them as leading lines to bring the eye here. I think also this probably needs to be a little bit taller. Or it should be on wheels that increase its height. Okay, so what was I saying? I think, yeah, this sense of adventure, it also makes paintings like way more fun for me to work on, because I can so easily kind of get lost in those sort of details in my own paintings as well. Like I am kind of like navigating all of the routes, and I'm constantly thinking that what would be like more fun, like could there be like a secret doorway here, or those sort of elements that can make an environment seem a bit more exciting. I think this sort of detail is also one that kind of communicates old architecture, where they can have these elements that kind of like make the building more inconvenient, and honestly in a bad way, like for example accessibility, that for example for somebody like with a wheelchair or a lot of baggage that they want to transport here, like squeezing through these sort of holes could be like inconvenient, and that's why they need to extend the platform here. And maybe that's the reason why the platform is not only extended, but it also needs to have a different ramp. So if you, for example, require wheels to get on this platform, then you would get there on this side. That is kind of like an addition to this. But thinking about these sort of elements, like it can also add a lot more history to the building. Hugo de Moule Ray is saying, "Hey Mikko, love your new course. My clouds are dope now." Great. Really happy that it's helping people. And I've seen people kind of like go through that course a few times and then like start using the color theory on new elements of buildings. I am adding a new project to the art course. It will take some time, but I want to add a free addition to the art course where I'm teaching people to design and make a building and how to incorporate like all of those composition methods in the art course, but with kind of like new, more advanced techniques based on all of the things that I have already taught in the previous lessons. So I'm not gonna go over all of the like complex color editing steps and how to design, like for example, flow for the eye to move and how to keep the eye in the composition. Like all of those things I will just assume that people will know from doing the first project, and then I will create a new kind of like more advanced second project with architecture and add it as like a free addition to anybody who has bought the course so far. That's just like my way of thanking anybody who has supported this channel by buying that art course. I think that's like way more tangible and more concrete way of like showing how grateful I am to people who have bought it and everybody who has reviewed it 5 stars on Gumroad, because for a small creator like me, like that sort of visibility like really helps. Because for example, if I let Gumroad market this art course product on their main page, they will take 30% of the sales, like 30% of something that I had made for months. And I just don't think that's right. So I haven't used that or any sort of like marketing tools like that, because I think that the work that I have put into the course, I'm really proud of it. And I think it provides, no, I know that it provides the transformation that I promised when I started making it. And I think that work is worth something, and I don't think it's right for some sort of a vendor to just take my money for promoting it. Anyway, it's like all of the people who have talked about the art course and those good reviews also, like they boost up the visibility, and like that's also something that I wanted to kind of thank in a more concrete way, and that's why I decided to make a new project. Okay, that's just like one way to play with light in that area. Let's make a new window. I still have some time. So now I can use the reference in a more concrete way, because the aspect ratio is the same. Whoa. I think this is quite close, but I want there to be a distinct difference between the stubby windows that I have in the upper section of this train station and these sort of like more classy looking vertical windows. So that's why I am not following my reference exactly, but I am designing my own version, and doing it in a different aspect ratio is automatically going to force me into making different design choices. So now there's an extra level of difficulty in doing this design, because I have my reference, I have my story that I'm building, and I have already designed a window that is deviating from my real life reference. So when I'm doing a new frame for this window, I have to kind of like merge all of these ideas, these 3 different ways of using these shapes in one window. I recently did this live stream on my membership for the Island of Time, and a huge part of that live stream went into me redesigning one window. There's just like one window that is quite large at the back of the painting, and I just kept making it over and over, and at one point I just had to stop because I thought like this whole live stream is just going to be me repainting the window over and over, and people are gonna feel like nothing is getting done. But the truth is that after that live stream was over, I did that same window at least 4 different times in different designs before I landed on the final one. And even still, it was like painted in the wrong perspective, so I ended up working on that one window for the entire duration of that piece. I just kept getting like more information about what is okay and what doesn't work in that area of the painting. So in the reference, there's this like organic piece that is combined with these very angular shapes. I just noticed that I'm doing it again. Well, I can't be sorry for everything. Sometimes design process is just this. It's just about making the same thing again and again until it works. I think that's something that I can be happy with. Okay, now I'm gonna group these so they're gonna be easier to move around. I really think that these magnetics buttons are like extra sticky and sometimes just require a lot of patience to deal with. So these are like the fancy windows, so I'm putting them on the ground level. And then up here on the second floor, I'm gonna have like more basic looking windows because those are for the staff of the train station. Maybe there's some sort of like, I don't know, coffee shop upstairs for people to wait for their train, and like a ticket office on the other side, and people can use the walkway to get between those two things. This is one of those kind of rules when you are organizing your layers that is kind of like, if you stick to it, it's easy to keep things organized. Monica Richardson is saying, do you keep physical sketchbooks? If you do, how would you describe them? Anxiety inducing, how is that? What would your advice be around sketchbooks? I think the same advice applies to sketchbooks as to digital paintings. Like, finish your sketches. Like, if a sketch hits a difficult part, draw that thing again. But if you start feeling stressed about the amount of paper that is being wasted in the process, then maybe start doing your sketches on something else than paper or sketchbooks. I mean, nobody says that you need to have physical sketchbooks. For me, and I know that I might be like weird in this sense, but I like the idea of like having this sort of like trash paper when I'm working on sketches. I like working on paper that comes from those sort of like copy paper stacks. You can just throw it away. I always felt so much pressure that like every page in a sketchbook needs to be like super fancy, and in the end it just didn't make me want to draw. And I just thought like one day that like I don't need to have this stress in my life. Like, this is not the most important part of sketching. The sketchbook should not have this power over me, that I can do sketches on whatever paper that I feel like, and not in this format that is just like giving me anxiety for no additional benefit. I love post-it notes too. One thing that I don't like to sketch on is graph paper, because then it's really difficult to use that sketch. As long as I can extract the lines for use in some other format, then it's fine. Oh my god, my back is dying. Shine Iva is saying, it's sad artists are so dependent on so many commercial issues. I think, what if creative people could gather their resources and make exhibition or art gallery? Art people give all their time and strength to art and feelings. We are always on the verge of bankruptcy. Yeah, I feel that. I think I had to make some really difficult decisions in the beginning of this year, like for financial reasons, and I ended up taking a lot of like freelance projects because of that. But the reason was like, honestly, that I don't want to go into another like full-time job as a concept artist. I want my priority to be to make these videos and make content for you guys. So that's the reason why I thought that like it's gonna work on that stuff basically. And I also wanted to finish the art course. That was really important to me because it's always been something that I want to provide to people who can't like attend my physical classes. And I wanted to do it in a like affordable way because I know that art schools are really expensive. Okay, elsewhere, like here in Finland, schools are pretty much free. I think these sort of like little tweaks where I get to like play with light and add this sort of like visual appeal, they're very satisfying for me to work on. Feels so fun to get those sort of elements right. When you're doing these sort of like design elements, you can kind of like design the light in as well, and that can be fixed later when you understand the geometry of your building better. But you can kind of like push the appeal of the way that light falls on your structures. I think that's one of the benefits of painting over 3D applications, because you have like basically infinite control over every aspect of your piece and space. I'm gonna focus on some of the chat messages. Sorry. Abe is saying, I wonder if I should go the digital or the traditional art way, because I love to paint digitally, but I have been drawing traditional for a pretty long time. You don't have to drop one for the other. I mean, if I had more time, I would definitely do more traditional art, but I don't feel like that's a choice you absolutely have to make. Like, just do whatever feels right for you, or like do both. What's your iPad Pro configuration? I don't know what the configuration means in this context. I will be adding, this is a no drive live stream, but somebody is saying, Sid is saying, just an idea, you can hang a small billboard or city name under your bridge. I am going to be adding a billboard, but that's not where I'm going to place it, because it would draw too much attention. Text in composition always draws attention, and if I position it in a not perspective, then I will lead the eye in there with all of these leading eyes of tracks and wires. So that's not something that I will do for that reason. Also, I will not do it because you suggested it, because like that's the way my creativity works. If somebody suggests something, then you will 100% sure know that I will not be doing that. Sorry. Feeling bad about commenting about wires. Don't worry, like I had a terrible perspective issue with my previous painting, like until the very last seconds of that piece. Like, I'm sure that when I post that next video where people will see that perspective mistake like hanging on throughout the entire process, it will drive people crazy. But yeah, that stuff happens. But honestly, in buildings, even in complex, I would like consider this to be quite a complex building. Even in complex buildings like this, like when you're in that stage where you're actually just fixing your perspective so that it makes sense, there's not that many lines that it's completely possible to go through every single line and make sure that they make sense later. But what I want to focus on in these live streams is the design aspect. I think that's really important, especially since like I'm doing something in perspective. The perspective is not going to make the design any better or worse. It's just going to make that idea easier for everybody to read, and that is important. And for that reason, it is important to fix the perspective mistakes in the end. But when you're in the process of designing your piece, I think it's super important to focus on what creates the story, what creates the mood, and focus on just like tweaking those elements over and over. And when it comes time to fix those perspective things, like that's not going to be the hardest part in your piece. I promise you that. Especially if you're working on a digital illustration, like we are spoiled with tools to help with this stuff. Hello, Mikko. Welcome back. Yeah, I guess I have been away, but for Angry Mob members, I have been making content for Angry Mob all the time. By the way, I will be uploading this process to Angry Mob members next week. I promise that. And the processes are usually around like 1 month available for download, but they are not permanent. It's just like one way for me to thank people for supporting me. We are also doing these art assignments as a group on Discord, and I think that's super fun. And this is actually like my art assignment for the new art assignment that we are doing, and it's about 1-point perspective. And I'm currently creating this series of like different live lesson videos where we tackle like different perspectives and just like explaining like what are the benefits of each. And because it's a series and on membership, I can kind of like count on people like having the access to the previous parts, so that I don't have to make every video like I'm talking to a new audience like you do on YouTube. I don't know if everybody knows that. So in the end, I'm hoping that we can go into even more complex perspective art assignments, and through those kind of use these lessons that we have learned in the previous art assignments and take our skills to the next level so that we can all improve. And it's like super inspiring. I don't know, like with every time that I do those live lessons, I feel like so inspired to start working myself. And in the previous art assignment live lesson, there was not enough time for me to start doing this piece on my own, but I did come up with this idea that I want to do a train station like this. It's just like in the few minutes that I had after the lecture portion, and I just like fell in love with the idea so much that I thought that like I want to do this assignment myself. I don't want to just do the teacher part here, because I'm also an artist, and I think that's one way for me to kind of like keep myself happy. If I just like did art teaching, I think that could be a fun job, and I really do enjoy teaching art. I think I care a little bit too much. That's why I don't think I would make a good full-time teacher, because I'm also always like so completely emotionally drained after a course ends. It's just I try so hard that the students will like just learn everything that I can give them in that time frame. So after like each course is over, I'm just like semi-burnt out, which obviously like would not be sustainable if I was a full-time teacher. And I know that like full-time teachers, like they care as well, but it's just like I'm not able to kind of like put it into perspective that I need to be there working the next month and the month after that. So I think I'm just a bit too intense as a teacher. How do you choose your color? Like currently I'm using this palette called 8 AM, and that was the starting point for these colors. Now I do want to say starting point. This palette is from the collection of 24 palettes that is a download in my art course on Gumroad. But you can get this palette right here for free if you just screenshot this screen right now, and you can just use this same palette for free. You don't have to get the course for that. So the thing with palettes is that I recommend that you have editing room in your palette so that you don't have colors that are almost black, almost white, or too saturated. Because when you are in the editing phase of your painting, then you can use that editing room. To enhance your paintings. Okay, now that I'm thinking about where to put the ticket sales, so I'm gonna do this planning on a new layer so that you can see what I mean. So because this area of the building is bigger, I think it houses a lot more people at once. So for that reason, it makes sense for this to be the ticket sales portion of this train station. Maybe that means that I can extend this into a terrace where there can be, like, for example, outdoors coffee shop for people to wait for the train. Okay, are you all with me? So because this area is the ticket sales thing, that means that I should have the doors to the platform here. So I'm gonna have several doors side by side to enable this high volume of traffic of people to move there. And here I'm just gonna have a small door. And this is for the staff. So this was never intended for people that go to the platform. It is just for people that are selling the tickets inside this train station. Okay, it's just like trying to process all of these different elements. So the people go upstairs here. Maybe that's also space where they can wait for the train when it's winter and it's more comfortable to stay indoors and wait for the train to arrive. But during summer, I think there's enough space here to have another terrace for different directions. I think that looks kind of cute. See, it's all, again, like that idea of like having just spaces that like for a kid would be like adventurous and fun to explore. in these old stations, they also have these sort of like parts of the tracks that are usually located further away from the train stop, but where, for example, maintenance vehicles and just like people can go across the tracks, which of course, like in this day and age, is too dangerous to design this sort of stuff. But these sort of locations still exist, just nearby from where I live. So maybe having some sort of like a beam here that will stop people from crossing over to the other side when it's not the right time. And it's gonna have this folding mechanism. It's gonna take less space when it's lifted up. And some sort of a box for this to function. I think this sunlight haze is gonna be an easy way for me to like take away from like a lot of like those visually noisy areas that are not important details for people to read, so that they can focus on the silhouette of this train station, because that is something that I want people to notice. How much time do I have? Few more minutes. I need to like start leaving soon because I have a running class. That's why I started this live stream 1 hour earlier, because I wanted to make sure that I have enough time to make something, and I'm really glad, because otherwise I would just have nothing done. So here the windows are going to be kind of like more plain. But I can still make the exterior of the train station be kind of like decorative with these wooden beams. And I have plenty of like reference material that I can use to make those sort of decorative elements look nice. I'm gonna try to answer some of the questions really quickly before I end the stream. Just wanna make sure that like the visual impact is kind of there. Nidi NIDY is saying, hi all. If you don't know your personal style yet and like to switch between different styles, I guess, if you want to switch between different styles, would you rather stick to one style and learn more about it or keep changing? I feel it's hard to commit. I don't recommend committing to a style. Style is what you know. That's the end result of what you know about who you are and how you make art. If you commit to a style, that can mean like just repeating certain kind of like visual motifs that can be very artificial. So just keep learning and creating art and do not worry about style. It will come on its own. Just keep listening to what things you like, what kind of things you are interested in, and those things other people will notice as your style. Don't think that your style is like the shape of noses that you draw, or shape of eyes, or how the hair curls on your characters' faces. Those are things that anybody can draw, but just like the more smaller details and those decisions and the visual design choices that you make, those are more important to what built your style. And welcome to Strange Child, to Angry Mob. I hope you take part in this latest art assignment. Ken Chen is saying, Mikko, is it better to paint those light and shadows early, like how you are doing now, or later with blend mode? That depends. I think I like to work on these sort of like light effects as in a very late stage. But if they are part of the visual design, like for example here, I added this light effect here in screen blend mode, because that's going to be a very important composition element. It's going to eat away a lot of that visual noise. So for that reason, that's one specific light is important for me to add at this phase. But notice how low saturation it is. That is because I am preserving editing room at this stage. I don't do lighting effects at this point in the process where I'm doing a design for a building. I think the design, by the way, is already there. Like there might be a lot of like detail that I will add to this later, but the design is done. Like that is done. It's all just technical stuff from this point onwards. So for design purposes, like it's important for me to like place that lighting there, but it's placed in a not too bright. These colors are not going to overexposed whites or full saturation. It still has editing room there. That's a really good question. Danny is saying hello from Australia. Hello Australia. It was nice seeing Australia in the Eurovision yesterday, or today, actually. It comes so late. Lua is saying, hi all, popping up for a bit before I head to the shops. Looking forward to watching the whole thing later, carrying on with my assignment. So Lula is also in the Angry Mob. Really enjoying it so far. Yes, great. I think a lot of people have found this like 1 point perspective assignment a bit difficult, but I think it's nice that people are bringing up those visual problem situations that they have on Discord, because we can kind of like crowdsource this learning, because when you're creating a single illustration, you get the teachings that you learn from like solving those visual problems in your own illustration. But when you are sharing your work with a group like this, that's an opportunity for everybody to learn from everyone's like struggles. So I think it's really important to be open and like just discuss, like even if it's something that you have already solved, like I had problem with this area, but I solved it in this way, then when everybody else like faces those difficulties in their own paintings, they are already like one step ahead, so that they don't get stuck and they can kind of like push their own work further. So I think it's really nice that everybody's sharing their work. Okay. It's so wild how a few scribbles can be transformed in such a beautiful painting. Thank you. I know that it's still kind of rough, but like I think it's important to like look at the ideas. And I think the idea that I had, it's here, and I'm like so excited about like all of those visual story element details that are coming from this, like where the ticket sales are, where the small coffee shop is, how people get from one side of the tracks to another, like if they are walking or if they are using a wheelchair or if they have like luggage, how are they going from one place to another. I think that's like super exciting, and I can like see those answers in this already, and so for that reason I think the design portion is done. Of course the illustration is gonna need work. I'm gonna love painting that sky. I'm so excited about that as well. Okay, I need to get going so that I don't miss the running class. I have like 9 minutes to change clothes and run there. Strange Child is saying, hi Mikko, I hope to take part soon. Still going through your art course, been through about 10 times now. There's so much in it. Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. Like, especially the second lesson in the art course, I recommend, if you have already done, for example, a sky painting during that art course, to go back into the second lesson and then look at an illustration like this one. Like, for example, now that you're in the Angry Mob, you can do this art assignment with us, and then look at the second lesson in the art course and implement those composition rules into your building design. Because then you will see that like those are not just composition rules for creating skies, but they are for creating any type of illustrations, and you can make any painting better with that composition checklist. Okay, I really have to get going. Thanks everybody for like going through all of those like sound challenges in the beginning, and I promise I will keep learning about this technology that I have here to make everything work, and I'll see you guys in my next video. I hope you go and make like one of these 1-point perspective illustrations. I think it's a really fun challenge, and it can teach you a lot about specifically design. Okay. Bye.